5:07 in the morning. 3 knocks on the door. Not frantic. Not angry. 3 evenly spaced knocks. Exactly 1 breath apart, the rhythm of people who knock on strangers' doors for a living. I opened the door in my workout clothes, hair still damp with sweat from a 5-mile run before dawn. Standing on my front step was a young woman in a gray blazer, a file folder in her hand, and behind her, a Davidson County patrol officer. Grace Bennett. She held up her badge. Dana Whitfield, Child Protective Services. We've received an anonymous report of suspected physical abuse of a child at this address. I have an emergency investigation order. Is your son home? Behind me, small bare feet touched the hardwood floor. Noah, 7 years old, stood at the bottom of the stairs in his airplane pajamas, both arms wrapped around the model F-16 his father left him. He looked at the strangers, then at me, and asked in that sleepy voice that squeezes my heart to this day, "Mommy, did we do something wrong?" No, son. We did nothing wrong. But it would take 42 more days of hell before I could prove it. 6 weeks later, I stood in the hallway of the Nashville family court, and my own mother in her lavender coat, a gold cross brooch glittering on her lapel, stood blocking the aisle, sneering loud enough for 24 people in that hallway to hear. She is a dangerous psychopath. She said it with the confidence of someone who had paid for an entire machine built to crush me. A psychiatrist who had never met me. The most expensive lawyer in Middle Tennessee. A 40-page file calling me a threat to my own son. Then the oak door of courtroom 2C opened. Judge Raymond Holt walked in, sat down, and turned to the first page of the case file. His eyes stopped at my name, then lifted, looking straight at where I stood at attention behind the defense table. And he spoke the words that froze every molecule of air in the room. "Good morning, Colonel." My mother's face hardened like plaster. Her lawyer dropped his pen. My brother went pale, as if he had just seen handcuffs. But to understand why a mother would hire an entire system to crush her own daughter, and why their perfect plan collapsed in exactly 31 seconds of audio, we have to go back 6 weeks. To the morning those 3 knocks tore my life apart. Before I go on, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. I want to know from which corners of the world my brothers and sisters are keeping watch with me tonight. My name is Grace Bennett, 44 years old. Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army, 21 years of service, a logistics intelligence officer stationed at Fort Campbell. My job, put simply, is to find the truth in the scattered scraps of data that other people throw away, a convoy that vanishes off the communications grid, an ammunition depot that comes up short with no explanation, a supply route leaking information. I did that job in Iraq. I did that job in Afghanistan. I never imagined I would have to do it in my own mother's living room. That morning, Miss Whitfield worked the protocol with chilling precision. She walked through every room of my house, photographing the refrigerator, the medicine cabinet, Noah's bedroom. She interviewed the boy alone in the living room, the door left ajar, while the patrol officer stood next to me in the kitchen, as if I might flee my own home. Then came the moment I will never forget. Miss Whitfield gently rolled up Noah's pajama sleeve to check standard procedure and stopped. On my son's left arm were 3 bruises, 3 round marks, fading yellow at the edges, lined up in a row, the shape of fingers squeezing tight. I stood frozen. I had bathed Noah on Saturday night. I had rubbed sunscreen on him Sunday morning. Those bruises did not exist. They could not exist. I fell, Noah mumbled, eyes on the floor. I fell at Grandma's house last week. Miss Whitfield took notes. No one in that room believed a 7-year-old saying I fell when the marks on his arm were the fingerprints of an adult hand. And the only adult under investigation in this house was me. The process ran like a machine with no off switch. For the duration of the investigation, 30 days, Noah had to be placed with the nearest relative not under investigation. And the nearest relative, according to the file, was his grandmother, Eleanor Bennett, 68 years old. Pillar of the Church Women's Association in Franklin. The woman the whole community called a living saint. I was granted supervised visitation, 2 sessions a week, 60 minutes each, At the county visitation center, a low beige building reeking of industrial hand sanitizer, where fathers and mothers sat 3 feet from their children under one-way glass. And even a teddy bear had to pass inspection on the way in. I stood at the door watching Ms. Whitfield buckle Noah into the back seat of the government car. The boy pressed his palm against the window. I pressed mine against it from the outside, exactly 5 millimeters of glass between me and my son. In 21 years of service, I have sent convoys into hostile fire zones without knowing how many vehicles would come back. No send-off in my life ever made my legs want to buckle like that one. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen and did the only thing I know how to do when the world spins out of control. I built a timeline. Michael, my husband, a captain, a pilot, was killed in a training flight 5 years ago, when Noah had just turned 2. Since then, I raised our son alone through 2 deployments. And during both, I did what every soldier far from home does. I trusted family. I signed a limited power of attorney for my mother to manage the household spending, pay the bills, and look after Noah whenever the school called and I was half a world away. I believed that blood was the last line of defense. I believed wrong. Because those knocks at 5 in the morning were not the beginning of the story. They were the counterattack. 9 days earlier, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, I opened my banking app to put down a deposit for Noah's science summer camp. His education fund, the account I opened the day he was born, where every hazard duty allowance I ever earned had flowed for 7 years, showed a number that made me blink and read it 3 times. $214.60. It should have been $38,000. I opened my deployment savings account next. $52,000 combat pay from 2 tours. The sweat of night watches in Kandahar had evaporated too. I did not panic. Panic is a luxury my profession stripped from me 20 years ago. I poured a glass of water, sat down, and did what I do with every ammunition count that comes up short. I traced it. 6 transactions, spread across 5 weeks. All executed under the authority of the spending power of attorney I had signed for my mother. And all of it $90,000. Not a cent missing flowed to a single destination, KB Capital Ventures, a single-member limited liability company registered in Nashville. Owner Kyle Bennett. My brother, 39 years old. Unemployed for 4 years but calling himself an independent financial advisor. And, according to what the family whispered behind his back, in over his head in crypto. That Sunday afternoon, I drove to Franklin for the usual family dinner. Roast chicken. Lace tablecloth. My mother at the head of the table with her pearl necklace and the smile of a woman who had just donated to an orphanage on the 6 o'clock news. I waited until dessert was served. Then I laid the stack of bank statements on the table, right next to my mother's plate. 6 transactions highlighted in yellow. I want an explanation. From both of you. Kyle didn't look at the papers for more than 2 seconds. He leaned back in his chair, swirled his wine glass, and smiled the smile he had been smiling since he was 10 years old. Every time he broke something of mine and knew for certain someone would take his side. It's just an investment, sis. You don't understand the market. 3 months and I'll pay you back double. That is Noah's education fund. That is money I traded for nights listening to mortar rounds land 200 meters from my tent, Kyle. And then my mother set down her fork. She didn't look at the statements. She looked at me with the look it took me 40 years to read correctly, the look of someone who had never seen me as a daughter, but as a difficult asset. Money in this house is family money, she said, her voice as even as scripture. And this family is run by me. You've been gone for 20 years. And now you come home to teach me how to take care of your brother. I stood up. I folded the statements. And I said the sentence that, I would later understand, was the one that tripped the mine. You have 72 hours to return the money to Noah's account. After that, I revoke the power of attorney, and I go to the police. Not because of the money. Because that is your grandson's future. I drove home. In my rearview mirror, through the lit dining room window, I saw my mother and Kyle leaning their heads together. At the time, I thought they were panicking. I was wrong. They were planning. 6 days after that dinner, an anonymous call came into the Child Protective Services hotline, describing in detail the bruises on the arm of the Bennett child. And 3 days after the call, Ms. Whitfield knocked on my door at 7 minutes past 5 in the morning. They didn't play defense. They struck first. Because they understood something every manipulator understands. The best way to silence a witness is to turn the witness into a suspect. A mother under investigation for abusing her own child, every accusation she makes about money becomes nothing but the whimpering of a lunatic out for revenge against her family. From the moment I understood that, I stopped calling the woman in Franklin my mother inside my own head. Her, and the brother swirling his wine glass him. Because family is not a noun of blood. Family is a rank. And they had stripped themselves of it. The first supervised visit fell on a Thursday afternoon. The room was 10 feet by 13. Cream walls. 1 plastic table. 2 chairs. A camera mounted in the ceiling corner with a red light blinking in steady rhythm. A staff member led Noah in. He was wearing a new sweater I had never bought, his hair combed to the side the way she liked it. He sat down in the chair across from me, 3 feet away, and did not move closer. "Hey, buddy," I said. "I've missed you so much." Noah looked at the camera first, then at me. And he spoke in the flat voice of a child reciting a memorized lesson, a voice I would rather take a full magazine of rifle fire than ever have to hear. "Grandma says you're sick in the head. Grandma says if I tell you what happens at her house, you'll have to go to the hospital forever, and I'll never see you again." For the 60 minutes of that visit, my son sat 3 feet away from me and was afraid of me. Not because of anything I had done to him, but because someone was holding an eraser, and day by day, little by little, rubbing me out of my child's mind and drawing in my place a monster wearing my face. The next week, the second blow landed. My unit commander called me into his office. An anonymous letter from a concerned citizen had been sent to the security office, reporting that Lieutenant Colonel Grace Bennett was under investigation by Child Protective Services for abuse. Per regulation, my access to classified information was temporarily suspended pending verification. 21 years. From a green second lieutenant at Fort Benning to a logistics intelligence officer holding top-secret clearance. All of it hanging by a thread braided out of anonymous phone calls. That night, I did the thing I had been avoiding for 2 weeks. I walked into Noah's room. The room was exactly as it had been the morning he was taken. The airplane blanket lay crooked, half on the bed, half on the floor. I folded it, smoothed every crease flat, to barrack standard, because hands need an order to follow to keep from shaking. Then I opened the closet and took out the wooden box of Michael's effects. On top was his pilot's watch, the crystal shattered in a spiderweb. The second hand frozen forever at the moment his T-38 hit the ground 5 years ago. I closed the watch in my palm and felt the cold metal edge press into my skin. I did not cry. Instead, I did 4 rounds of tactical breathing. In through the nose, 4 seconds. Hold, 4 seconds. Out through the mouth, 4 seconds. I took all of it, the rage, the fear, the image of Noah sitting 3 feet away from me, and pressed it down into my diaphragm, down through my legs, down into the floorboards, the way you press a grenade with the pin still in it into a steel box. And in the stillness after the 4th breath, my mind went clear for the first time in 2 weeks. I heard my own voice, not the voice of a mother falling apart, but the voice of the intelligence officer in the command tent in Mosul. On the night an entire 16-vehicle convoy vanished off the communications grid, and everyone around me had already started writing the eulogies. That night, I found the convoy using 3 scraps of data other people had thrown away, a fuel receipt with the wrong timestamp, a column of smoke on a 4-hour-old satellite image, and the habit of one staff sergeant who always shortcut through a dry creek bed. She and he believed they were crushing a panicked, isolated single mother with nothing in her hands. They forgot what I do for a living. My job is to find the truth in the things other people throw away. And they, in 6 hurried weeks of building this trap, had left more tracks behind them than a 16-vehicle convoy. I set Michael's broken watch on Noah's desk, crystal facing the door, like a promise. Then I went downstairs, cleared the dinner table, and began the war of my life. If you have ever been turned into the guilty one in your own child's eyes, or in the eyes of the people you love most, hit that like button right now. and subscribe, because this channel exists for people like us. Then tell me in the comments, what kept you standing on your darkest night? I read every single comment. Because people like us need to know we do not stand alone. 2 a.m. The kitchen pitch dark, only the blue light of the laptop screen on my face. On the table, 5 years of bank statements printed on paper, stacked by quarter, each stack clipped with a note. The clock above the sink ticked exactly twice a second, and I had sat there long enough to know its rhythm by heart. People imagine a war beginning with gunfire. It doesn't. Every war I have ever been part of began exactly like this one person sitting alone in the dark, in front of a screen counting. I don't keep a diary. I keep a ledger. And a ledger does not forgive, and it does not lie. The next morning, I called the person an old comrade at Fort Campbell had sent me with exactly one line attached. If it's paperwork grinding somebody to dust, call her. Ruth Caldwell, retired major, 26 years in the Judge Advocate General's Corps JAG. She listened to me lay it out for exactly 4 minutes, never interrupting once. Then asked 3 questions. Do you keep every receipt? Yes. Have you contacted your mother or brother on your own since CPS came? No. Do you plan to win with tears or with files? With files, Major. The other end of the line went quiet for 2 seconds. Then she said, good. I didn't leave JAG to stand around watching soldiers get ground up by paperwork. My fee you can pay in installments. Your discipline you pay up front, I need it starting today. That afternoon, Major Caldwell sat at my dining table and drew a 3-pronged strategy on a yellow legal pad. Prong 1, prove innocence inside the CPS file using objective evidence, not testimony. Prong 2, trace the source of the anonymous report. Prong 3, flip the entire financial file into a criminal case, forcing the attackers onto defense. One more rule, she said, tapping her finger on the pad. Between now and the hearing, you speak to no one but me. The loud one is the scared one. We are not scared. That evening, I cleared out the dining room. I stood the big whiteboard against the longest wall and opened a box of index cards in 3 colors. Red cards the timeline of the 3 bruises on Noah's arm, cross-referenced against every pickup and drop-off for 3 weeks. Who picked him up, who brought him back, what time, who witnessed it. Blue cards 6 transactions, account numbers, reference codes, and every public trace of KB Capital Ventures. Yellow cards every contact she had made with the school, the church, and the neighbors in the past 90 days. I pinned each card with the cold focus of an intelligence officer reconstructing an enemy's route of movement. And I need to say this clearly, because later, people asked me where I found the strength to get back up during those weeks. I did not get back up, because I never fell. I did not get stronger. I just stopped pretending to be a civilian. For 21 years, every time I came home on leave, I folded my uniform away and practiced speaking softly, smiling more, letting things go. The family called it getting back to normal. Now I understand. They never wanted me normal. They wanted me disarmed. On the 3rd night of the trace, 2 discoveries arrived almost at once. The first was sitting right above my own front door. The doorbell camera, the one I had installed 3 years ago and forgotten about, kept its recordings in the cloud for 60 days. I scrolled back through every afternoon. And on day 8 before the investigation, inside the exact window the CPS medical report estimated for the age of the 3 bruises, the video appeared. Kyle parking in front of my house, picking Noah up as a favor. Outside the schedule the afternoon he had texted to say he was passing by the school anyway. On the video, Noah climbed into the car with 2 bare, unmarked arms in the sunlight, waving at the camera the way he always did. My son left my house whole, and came back from their world with 3 finger marks on his skin. That same night, I opened my phone and saw Kyle's newest social media post, him leaning against a gray Porsche. Caption, work hard. Play harder. I ran the plate. A rental. $190 a day. He posted that photo in the same week my son's education fund held $214.60. I screenshotted it, printed it, pinned it to the blue column. No anger. Just an entry in the ledger. The second discovery came to me on its own. Miss Harper, Noah's second-grade teacher at Crestview Elementary, called my personal number after hours, with the careful voice of someone who knows she is stepping over a procedural line. Miss Bennett, I'm not sure this helps, but Noah's grandmother has come to the school office twice in the past month, asking to update his emergency contact records. And she told the office staff, I'm quoting word for word, because I was standing right there, that the boy's mother is going away for long-term treatment. From now on, everything goes through me. The school keeps a visitor log. Bennett, with signatures and times. Twice. Both times before the day CPS knocked on my door. She was not reacting to the investigation. She had been setting the stage for it. That Sunday evening, while I sat cross-checking the copy of the school's visitor log against the yellow column, the Franklin Church Women's Association posted its spring fundraiser photos. Dead center of the frame was her cream silk blouse, the gold cross brooch catching the stage lights, holding up an oversized presentation check, surrounded by applause. Caption, a woman of faith and family. I laid the printed photo next to the visitor log page with her signature on it. The same hand. One signing a charity check for the cameras. One signing a visitor log on the way into plant. In the mind of an entire school, the idea that her own daughter was insane. I pinned them to the board, side by side, and closed the ledger for the day with numbers. 60 days of camera data. 8 days before the investigation. 2 signatures in a visitor log. $190 a day for a rented Porsche. And $214.60 in my son's education fund. The books were not balanced yet, but they were starting to talk. The third working session with Child Protective Services fell on a cloudy Wednesday morning. Miss Whitfield was the same as the 2 times before. Gray blazer, file folder, questions straight off the form, and a face that gave nothing away for free. I answered each question short, precise, no adjectives. Major Caldwell sat beside me, silently taking notes. Then, when the form had turned to its last page, Whitfield set down her pen. She looked at me longer than procedure allows, and asked a question that was not on any form. Miss Bennett. The anonymous report to the hotline described bruises on the child's left arm. The left arm. Did you know that our physician only found the bruises? 2 days after that call, the room went so quiet I could hear Major Caldwell's wristwatch. The caller knew which arm the bruises were on, I said slowly, before anyone had seen them. Before anyone was allowed to see them. Whitfield corrected. And for one very short second, I saw in her eyes the thing I had only ever seen in the best intelligence officers I ever trained. The physical discomfort of facts refusing to line up. Only the person who made the bruises could describe them before they were found. 3 days later, Major Caldwell called me, and there was a tone in her voice I had never heard from her. Something close to excitement. Investigator Whitfield has requested the hotline's call logs. The anonymous call did not come from a cell phone. It came from a landline, the phone at the guard station of the Brentwood Hills gated community. Brentwood Hills. The gated neighborhood where she had lived for 15 years. The guard station she strolled past every evening, where she stopped to chat with the guards long enough that the whole neighborhood called her kind Mrs. Bennett. A call from a public phone smart enough not to use the house line, but not smart enough to remember that a guard station keeps a duty log, and a duty log records who was standing there, and in which hours. Not enough to convict, but more than enough to make a conscientious investigator turn the wheel. Noah's second interview was conducted with a child psychologist, in a room with a green carpet and a box of crayons. You don't question children with questions. You hand them a blank sheet of paper. Noah drew Grandma's house. In my son's picture, the house had a white fence, a tree, a sun in the top right corner, everything a 7-year-old draws. Except for one detail. The door of the small upstairs room had a padlock drawn on it, shaded in heavy and dark, nearly half the size of the door itself. And outside the door, he drew a figure standing straight, arms hanging at its sides. The specialist asked who that was. Noah said, "That's the person who watches me sleep." Children don't know the word confinement. They only know how to draw it. The professional report noted signs of psychological coercion, High probability the child was being trained in his testimony. The clinical word is coaching. My word is, someone was rehearsing my son to play a witness against his own mother. At the end of that week, Miss Whitfield asked to meet me and Major Caldwell at the department office. She set 3 squared-off files down on the table and said the sentence I will remember for the rest of my life, not because it was moving, but because it is the rarest thing in the world. A person inside the system correcting course midstream. Colonel Bennett, I have been investigating in the wrong direction for 2 weeks. That error falls within my responsibility. Let me fix it by the book, but in the right direction. From that day on, in my ledger, Miss Whitfield became Dana. The woman who had knocked on my door at 5 in the morning was now the first person in the entire system to stand on the side of the truth. Not on my side, Dana was never on my side. And that is exactly why her testimony would later land with the weight of lead. She was on the side of the facts. And the facts, from beginning to end, stood on mine. Closing the ledger for that week. 1 anonymous call. 2 days before the bruises were found. 1 landline at the Brentwood Hills guard station. 1 heavily shaded padlock in a 7-year-old's drawing. And 1 investigator who had just turned the entire investigation around. While my file thickened night after night, Kyle's world began burning from the inside. The crypto market crashed 40% in 11 days. I knew, because I watched KB Capital Ventures' public wallet the way I used to watch an enemy's supply depot, and I saw on my screen the thing he was hiding from the entire family. Our $90,000, after 3 months of investing, was now worth less than $54,000. Every day that passed, the hole got deeper. The thief was drowning in the very thing he had stolen. Desperate people hurry. People in a hurry leave tracks. And their biggest track came to me on a Thursday evening, in the shape of a phone call from my mother's number. Major Caldwell had briefed me in the very first week. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. That means any conversation you are a party to, you have every legal right to record without informing the other side. If they call, answer. Say little, and record from the first second. The phone buzzed. The name on the screen. Mom, I hit record. Took 1 breath. And answered. Her voice was the honey she saved for television cameras. Grace, sweetheart. I'm calling because my heart is just breaking. Our family coming to this, I can't sleep at night. Honey, a calculated pause. Here's what I'm thinking. You withdraw that complaint against your brother. Family money stays behind family doors. In exchange, when I meet with the child services people next week, I'll speak well of you. I'll tell them you're a wonderful mother. People believe me. You know that. I said exactly 1 sentence. I'll think about it. Good girl, she said. I knew you were the sensible one. And then she did the thing the most confident people always do. She got careless. I heard the phone being lowered, but the call had not ended. The rustle of fabric. Ice knocking against the side of a glass. And her voice switched to an entirely different register course. Sharp, without 1 drop of honey, speaking to someone in the room. Let Grace believe there's still a door open. Losing the boy for a few months is worth it. Kyle, as long as she can never open her mouth about that money. If she goes to court, who'd believe her? Who believes a mad woman? Kyle's dry laugh, somewhere in the distance. Then the call cut off. I sat motionless, staring at the phone screen. The recording counter had stopped at the number I will carry with me to the end of this war. 31 seconds. In those 31 seconds was everything: motive, plan, cruelty, and the verdict they had read out against themselves in their own true voices. I sent the file to Major Caldwell with 1 line. Final piece of evidence. Legally obtained, I was a party to the call. She replied 4 minutes later. You just balanced the books. Now go to sleep, Colonel. The winner needs to be more rested than the loser. But that night, they were not done. Her petition to the court was supplemented with a new document. A psychological evaluation report from a private psychiatrist, a man who had never met me, never called me, never sat in the same room with me for a single minute of his life, concluding from a distance that I exhibited agitated paranoid type PTSD, presenting a potential danger to a minor. Attached to it, a petition for emergency custody of Noah. The hearing was set 9 a.m. Monday, courtroom 2C. Nashville Family Court. They still believed they were winning. Let them believe it. In my profession, there is a rule as old as war itself. Never interrupt your enemy while he is marching straight into your ambush. Sunday night, I ironed my charcoal gray suit flat enough to pass a uniform inspection board. I packed the files into my leather briefcase in the exact order they would be presented. Then I opened the leather-bound notebook that has followed me across 3 continents, and turned to the first page, where my own handwriting from 20 years ago was still intact. The first line, the words of General George S. Patton, don't tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. The second line in blue ink faded but never gone, from the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 9, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I closed the notebook, and before turning off the light, I wrote the final reconciliation of the preparation phase. 40% of a crypto wallet evaporated. 1 honeyed phone call. 31 seconds of truth. 1 doctor who never met his patient. And 9 a.m. Monday. The books were balanced. All that remained was to read them aloud in court. 8:45. Monday morning. The hallway of the Nashville Family Court smelled of industrial floor wax and burnt coffee from the vending machine in the corner. The sound of heels of file case wheels, of lives waiting to be judged. I arrived in the charcoal suit, hair in a regulation bun, briefcase in my left hand. My right hand holding Noah's small one. The court had allowed me to walk my son to the children's waiting room myself before the hearing, under the supervision of a social worker. 42 days. And this was the first time I had been allowed to hold my son's hand for more than 10 steps. She stood directly in front of the door to courtroom 2C. Lavender coat. Gold cross brooch. Kyle on her left, in a navy suit that very skillfully concealed a drowning man. Attorney Preston Vance on her right, polished and expensive. The moment I came into view, she raised her voice, not speaking to me, but for the 24 people in that hallway to hear. She is a dangerous psychopath. A few heads turned. A young mother pulled her child in close. 2 security officers at the end of the hall glanced at each other. She took a step forward, finger pointing into the space between us, her voice ringing like a speech. They're going to take her away for treatment. This child needs to be protected from her. I received each word the way you receive harassing fire not meant to kill, only to panic you out of your position. I did not leave my position. I did not blink. I crouched down to Noah's eye level, straightened his collar, and said, just quietly enough for only the 2 of us to hear, remember what Mom promised. Today is the last day you have to wait. Noah nodded. He took the social worker's hand, walked toward the waiting room, and looked back at me exactly once. That look was no longer the frightened look from the first supervised visit. Over the past 3 weeks, ever since Dana turned the investigation around and the visits were loosened, my son had begun to remember who his mother was. I stood up straight. I placed both palms on the oak door of courtroom 2C and pushed. The courtroom was nearly empty that Monday morning. At the plaintiff's table, Attorney Vance fanned his papers out with the confidence of a man who bills by the hour. She sat in the middle, back straight, hands folded over each other as if posing for a portrait. Kyle sat on the end, and I noticed he had changed his habit. No more swirling an imaginary wine glass. His hands were clenched together on the table, knuckles white. Major Caldwell and I took the defense table. She set down exactly 1 yellow folder and 1 small black USB drive. No fan of papers. No decoration. A ledger needs no decoration. The side door opened. All rise. Judge Raymond Holt walked in past 60, an angular face, the walk of a man who had had another life before the black robe. He sat down, opened the case file, turned past the cover page. His eyes ran down the page and stopped. I knew exactly which line he was reading. The defendant's occupation, with the copy of my service record that Major Caldwell had filed in the pre-hearing packet, and the insignia of the 101st Airborne Division printed on the corner of the folder, the division that, as I would later learn, a young Marine captain named Raymond Holt had fought alongside in a joint operation 30 years ago. He looked up. looked straight at where I stood at attention behind the defense table, and said clearly, loud enough for the microphone and every wall to hear, "Good morning, Colonel." Every molecule of air in courtroom 2C stopped moving. She blinked rapidly, her head jerking slightly back as if an invisible hand had pressed into her sternum. Attorney Vance's pen fell from his fingers, struck the wooden table with one dry knock, and rolled to the floor. Kyle spun toward his mother, and in that panicked look, I could read the entire foundation of their strategy cracking open. For 6 weeks, they had built everything on a single assumption that they were grinding down a lonely, panicked single mother with no allies and no standing. They hired a doctor. They hired a lawyer. But not one of them had spent 10 minutes finding out who I was. I brought my heels together. "Good morning, Your Honor." "Be seated," Judge Holt said, and turned to the room. His face closed again. "The court notes for the record. The court has no personal acquaintance with any party in this matter. Proceed." Attorney Vance picked up his pen, cleared his throat, and delivered his opening statement for 20 minutes. Credit where it is due. He was good. He painted me as a distant war machine, endlessly absent, carrying the battlefield home inside her head. He said the phrase agitated paranoid-type PTSD 4 times, slowing down each time like a man driving in a nail. He praised his client, the devoted grandmother, the pillar of faith of the Franklin community, with adjectives so polished they slid right off the ear. 20 minutes of eloquence. I sat still, hands resting on the yellow folder, and counted. Then it was our turn. Major Caldwell stood no microphone, no oration. She said exactly one opening sentence. "Your Honor, the defense will not argue in adjectives. We will present facts, in chronological order. Step 1, disarming the insanity weapon." Major Caldwell presented Exhibit 1, the comprehensive medical and psychological evaluation from Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the mandatory screening, every 6 months, for every officer holding top-secret clearance. The most recent one, performed 9 weeks earlier, signed by a Major General of the Medical Corps. The conclusion was read aloud before the court. No indication of post-traumatic stress disorder. No indication of behavioral abnormality, fit for unrestricted duty. Objection. Vance shot to his feet. Military documents are no substitute for a civilian evaluation. Overruled, Judge Holt said, without looking up. And the court will note for the record, a periodic Department of Defense evaluation, conducted in person, carrying a signature that answers for it, set against a report by a private psychiatrist who has never met the subject of his diagnosis. Mr. Vance, would you like the court to read aloud the methodology section of your client's report? I have been looking for that page, and I cannot find it. Vance sat down. His second pen lay untouched on the table for the rest of the hearing. Step 2, overturning the 3 bruises. The court's projection screen lit up. The doorbell camera footage. Day 8 before the investigation. Noah climbing into Kyle's car. 2 bare arms unmarked in the afternoon sun, waving at the camera. Major Caldwell placed beside it the CPS forensic report, dating the age of the bruises falling squarely inside the window when the boy was in their hands. Then she called her witness, Investigator Dana Whitfield, Davidson County Child Protective Services. Dana took the stand with her squared-off files and the level, even voice of a person loyal only to the forms. She presented 3 facts. 1, the anonymous report described bruises on the left arm 2 days before the department's physician found them. 2, the hotline logs placed the call at a landline in the guard station of Brentwood Hills, the plaintiff's place of residence, in a time window matching the plaintiff's evening walking habit as recorded in the guard's duty log. 3, the professional report from the child's drawing session, noting signs of coach testimony. Miss Whitfield, Major Caldwell asked, as the assigned investigator, what is your professional conclusion regarding this anonymous report? That the caller described the injury before the injury was documented, Dana said, each word dropping into the courtroom like stones onto a frozen lake. In our line of work, there is only one explanation for that. The woman who had knocked on my door at 7 minutes past 5 in the morning now stood at the witness stand and took that trap apart, brick by the book, and in the right direction. Step 3, Kyle on the stand. Major Caldwell called Kyle Bennett. He walked to the stand like a man trying to remember lines he had rehearsed in front of a mirror. Major Caldwell did not circle. She spread the 6 transactions across the projector. $90,000. 5 weeks. One single destination. KB Capital Ventures. Then she placed beside it the screenshot of the public investment wallet current value. $53,700. And falling. Mr. Bennett, you stated in your filings that these transfers were intended to preserve family assets. Would you care to explain to the court what preservation mechanism vaporizes $6,000 in 3 months? Kyle looked at Attorney Vance. Vance looked down at the table. He looked at his mother. She stared straight ahead, chin lifted high, abandoning him on the stand the way you abandon a chess piece with no moves left. And in that exact moment, the moment he realized he had been left behind, Kyle broke. It was Mom's idea. His voice cracked upward, his hand pointing toward the plaintiff's table. I just needed money to cover the losses. The child report thing was Mom's idea. She said we just needed to keep her buried in paperwork for a few months and it would all be over. Kyle, her voice tore out of her, sharp as a blade, and for 1/10 of a second, the entire courtroom heard the real voice of the woman wearing the cross brooch. Judge Holt struck his gavel once. The witness will continue. The plaintiff will maintain order unless she would prefer to leave this courtroom under escort. The rest of Kyle's testimony was a landslide. He confirmed the unscheduled afternoon pickup. Confirmed that he had held the boy's arm tighter than usual when he wouldn't get in the car, a phrase he thought was a defense. And the entire room heard as a confession. The loudest enemy is the enemy who is sinking. Step 4, 31 seconds. Major Caldwell held up the small black USB drive. Your Honor, the defense's final exhibit is an audio recording, 31 seconds long. Before it is played, I wish to establish the legal foundation. The recording was made by my client during a phone call to which she was a direct party. Under the law of the state of Tennessee, a one-party consent state, this recording is lawful and admissible as evidence. Noted, Judge Holt said. Then he looked at me. Anything to add before it is played, Colonel? I stood. 31 seconds. Your Honor. My mother's real voice. Play it, Judge Holt said. And here is what I want you, the people listening to this story, to understand clearly. You have known what is on that recording for the past 10 minutes. I had known for 6 weeks. Evidence is not there to surprise us. It exists to do one thing, and one thing only, to make the liar hear her own true voice, played through a speaker, in front of the whole world. The only person in that courtroom who did not yet know she was already dead was her. The court officer inserted the USB. The ceiling speaker crackled once. Then the room filled with my mother's voice, not the honeyed voice of the fundraisers, but the real one. Coarse and sharp. Let Grace believe there's still a door open. Losing the boy for a few months is worth it. Kyle, as long as she can never open her mouth about that money. If she goes to court, who'd believe her? Who believes a madwoman? 31 seconds. Then silence, the thick, curdled silence I had only ever heard after an explosion, when your ears ring and the world mutes itself. She did not scream. She did not faint. She did something more frightening than any of it. She reached up and straightened the cross brooch on her lapel, sat up straight, and smiled toward Judge Holt, the smile of a woman who had believed her entire life that with the right posture, the right jewelry, the right expression, any room in the world would submit. That smile died on her lips when Judge Holt began reading his rulings. Step 5, the reckoning. Judge Holt took off his glasses, folded them, and set them beside the gavel. He looked at the plaintiff's table for a long time before he spoke, and his voice was not loud at all, it was simply heavy. This court has sat for 22 years and heard thousands of lies. People lie out of fear, out of greed, out of desperation. This court has heard all of it. But staging injuries on the body of a 7-year-old child, coaching him to testify against his own mother, and using his fear of losing her as a weapon that is no longer lying. That is something this court does not have a word heavy enough to name. Then the rulings fell, one beat at a time, like artillery rounds landing on pre-computed coordinates. 1. The plaintiff Eleanor Bennett's petition for emergency custody, denied in its entirety. with a finding of malice noted for the record. 2. The Child Protective Services investigation of Grace Bennett, closed with the official finding of malicious and unfounded report the child to be returned to his mother that same day. 3. A no-contact order. Eleanor Bennett and Kyle Bennett are barred from coming within 500 feet of Noah Bennett, his school, and the defendant's residence, indefinitely, with a mandatory arrest clause upon violation. 4. The complete financial file, the audio recording, the hotline logs, and today's sworn testimony, referred to the Davidson County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation into grand theft, false reporting to a child protection agency, and the staging of evidence. 5. A formal referral to the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners to investigate the remote, no-contact diagnosis practice of the psychiatrist whose name appears on the report. The gavel fell. One strike. The hearing was over. I gathered the yellow folder into the briefcase and snapped the 2 brass locks shut 2 clicks that rang out in a room where no one had yet dared to breathe. I did not look at the plaintiff's table, not because I was holding myself back, but because the books were balanced, and you do not stare at a page that has been closed. I walked down the center aisle, pushed open the oak door, crossed the hallway, and at the end of the hallway, the door of the children's waiting room opened. Noah ran to me. I dropped to one knee on the stone floor, opened my arms, and 42 days ended with the weight of a 7-year-old body slamming into my chest. He pressed his face into my shoulder and whispered the question he had carried for 6 weeks. "You don't have to go to the hospital anymore." "Right, Mom." "No, son," I held him tight. "Mom's coming home. We're going home together." 1 year later, on a Saturday afternoon, I took the whiteboard down off the dining room wall. I removed each card red, blue, yellow, and filed them into a document box, in exact chronological order, the way you fold a flag. I labeled the lid with a single word: reconciled. Then I set the box on the highest shelf of the storage closet, closed the door, and did not open it again. People ask if I attended Kyle's sentencing. No. I know the outcome through Major Caldwell. On September 9th, he pled guilty to grand theft, 3 years probation. On October 2nd, the court entered the order of full restitution, $90,000, the investment wallet frozen down to the last cent. People ask if I read the local paper series about the woman of faith voted out of the Franklin Church Women's Association after the court transcript spread through the community. No. People ask if I know that the doctor who signed that remote diagnosis had his license to practice suspended. Yes, because on November 14th, the Board of Medical Examiners sent notice to the injured party, as procedure requires. I read the first line, then filed the letter into the document box, before I put the label on. I remember every date, because I wrote them in the ledger. Final entries. I did not need to watch them fall. I only needed to know the books were balanced. Accounting is not a profession of gloating. It is a profession of precision, and every number had returned to its rightful place. $90,000 ordered repaid in full. 3 bruises called by their true name in a court ruling. 42 days returned to my son and me in the form of the rest of our lives. 31 seconds preserved forever in the records of the Davidson County Court. And 500 feet the minimum distance between my family and the people who once called themselves family. But there is one number I never saw coming. It arrived by mail, 8 months after the hearing. Dana Whitfield, who still drops by the house some weekends, and who is the only adult besides me that Noah personally offers the cookies he bakes himself, used the file of our case to propose a procedural change to the department. Davidson County adopted it in the fall. From now on, every anonymous report of child abuse that coincides in time with a property or custody dispute inside the same family must pass a mandatory cross-check before any decision to separate the child. In the internal paperwork, that procedure carries the case number of our case. The letter came on a Tuesday afternoon, handwritten, postmarked from a town outside Fort Bragg. The sender was a sergeant first class, a single mother, a woman I have never met in my life. The letter was 4 lines long. The last line read, "They tried to do to me exactly what they did to you. But because of that procedure with your case number on it, my daughter slept in her own bed that night." I just want you to know. You didn't win only for yourself. I read the letter twice. Then I did the one thing I had never done with any piece of paper in this entire war. I did not file it in the box. I clipped it to the first page of the leather notebook, right beneath General Patton's words, and the verse from the book of Joshua in the place reserved for the things a soldier carries, not the things a soldier puts away. And Noah. Last Sunday afternoon, he sat on the sofa, bare feet tucked under him, holding his father's pilot watch. I had taken it in for a new crystal at the start of the year, the shattered spiderweb glass kept in the memory box, while the watch itself, for the first time in 6 years, was running again. I sized the band down as short as it would go and fastened it onto my son's wrist. Still too big. He turned the watch around and around, pressed it to his ear to hear the hands moving, then looked up at me with a smile that lit the entire sun-filled room. Dad's keeping time for us now, huh, Mom? I sat down beside him, and for the first time in a stretch of time so long I had stopped counting, and believe me, I am a person who counts everything. There was no number left in my chest waiting to be reconciled. Only the sound of the watch, steady as breathing, giving back to my son and me every second that had been stolen. They say a soldier's deepest wound is the enemy's bullet. They're wrong. An enemy only aims at your body. Family that betrays you aims at your name, at your child's memory of you, at the very definition of who you are in the eyes of the world. But I learned this, and I want to leave it with you. A liar needs an entire choir, a lawyer, a hired doctor, a whole community applauding. The truth does not. The truth needs only one person willing to sit down in the dark at 2 a.m, count until the count is right, keep the records straight, and stand up straight until the books speak for themselves. Don't be louder than the lie. Be more precise than it. Because noise fades and numbers remain. If you believe that real family is built on respect, and not on blood alone, hit that like button and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to prove the truth to people determined to believe the lie? I read every single story. Because people like us need to know we do not stand alone.